Have you ever stood in front of a burning pile of paper money, incense smoke rising into the night, and quietly wondered in your heart whether the person you miss actually knows it is you standing there? Have you ever woken from a vivid dream of a deceased parent or friend, your body covered in cold sweat, and secretly asked yourself if that was really just a dream, or if they had actually come back to see you? Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the channel. I am your old companion on this long road of questions about life, death, and everything in between. Today we are going to talk about something that almost everyone thinks about sooner or later, but very few people really understand in a deep and calm way. When a person dies, where do they actually go? When we stay in the world of the living, lighting incense, burning paper money, crying in front of a photograph, reciting sutras and prayers, do they actually know what we are doing? Are they somewhere close, watching us, missing us, being moved by us, or even complaining about us? In this video style talk, I want to walk with you through two big ideas that came from the original article and also from the broader ocean of spiritual and Buddhist teachings. First, from the perspective of karma, rebirth, and the 6 realms of existence, physical death is not a full stop. It is more like a comma in a very long sentence. For most beings, consciousness continues to flow, taking on new forms in different realms that are just as real as our current human world, even if we cannot see them with our ordinary eyes. Second, what the deceased actually need from us is very different from what many of us think. Piles of paper money, expensive rituals, and big shows of grief are not the core. What truly reaches them, what truly helps them, is the energy of compassion, the power of sincere practice, and the merit of good actions that we consciously dedicate to them. As we explore this, we will also naturally touch on themes like awakening, wisdom, cause and effect, daily practice, and destiny. Because the way we understand the dead completely changes the way we live as the living. So, take a breath. You do not need to force yourself to believe anything. Just treat this as a long conversation by a quiet lamp, where we dare to look directly at the questions that usually hide behind our busy routines. When someone we love dies, the first thing we usually feel is shock, even if they were already ill. Even if we told ourselves to be prepared. The moment we see that unmoving body or receive that final call, something inside us cracks. In those hours and days, we are thrown into a strange space. Their bed is still there. Their phone number is still in our contacts. That shirt is still hanging on the back of the chair. But the person is gone. For many people, the funeral days are a blur. There are visitors, flowers, rituals, papers to sign, formalities to handle. And then, suddenly, everyone leaves. The world seems to expect us to return to normal life after a certain number of days, as if grief were a fixed length of time that can be scheduled. But the heart does not obey such schedules. On certain nights, especially around festivals for the dead, on their death anniversary, or simply when life hits hard, we may find ourselves standing in front of a burning barrel, watching paper money, paper houses, paper cars, and even paper phones turn to ash and float up into the dark sky. Our hands are moving. Our lips might be murmuring, but deep down there is a simple question pounding in the chest. Do you see this? Do you know it is me? Do you receive what I am burning for you? In different cultures, different answers are offered. Some say the dead become angels. Some say they become stars. Some say they simply vanish into nothingness. Some say they haunt the places they loved. The Buddhist vision that shaped the original article is both more complex and more compassionate. It speaks of the 6 realms of existence and says that the journey of consciousness is like a traveler wandering through many different countries. The human realm is only one stop. There are realms of intense joy, realms of power, realms of pain, realms of hunger, realms of instinct, and so on. We are so used to this single human channel that we forget other frequencies might be playing at the same time. If we compare existence to a vast spectrum of radio frequencies, our human eyes and ears are like a cheap radio that can only catch one small band. Just because we cannot hear other channels does not mean they do not exist. The teachings suggest that when the physical body breaks down, the mind does not disappear like a soap bubble. It continues, propelled by its past tendencies and deep emotional patterns. This is what is meant by karma. Karma is not a punishment system set by an angry God. It is more like the momentum created by every thought, word, and deed we have accumulated. If someone lives a life dominated by greed, dishonesty, and cruelty, their mind becomes heavy, contracted, and hungry. If they live with generosity, honesty, and compassion, their mind becomes open, light, and naturally joyful. When the body dies, that mental momentum continues. Minds that are heavy and contracted are drawn toward realms that resonate with that vibration, like hungry ghost states. Minds that are open and loving are drawn toward brighter states. The original article spends time on the idea of the hungry ghost realm, a subtle state in which beings feel constant craving and lack. This is not some fairy tale. Think of a person in life who always feels like nothing is enough, no matter how much money or praise they receive. Their inner state is already that of a hungry ghost, even while alive. Physical death simply removes the human layer and reveals the underlying pattern more clearly. So when we ask whether the dead come back to see us, we have to understand that different beings land in very different situations after death. Some might indeed be so wrapped up in their own craving, fear, or confusion that they do not have the clarity or freedom to come visit. Others, especially those with strong emotional bonds, can and do get drawn near by the threads of love, attachment, regret, or unresolved business. There is a very important idea here, one that blends the spiritual vocabulary of karma with the psychological language of emotion. Thought is not nothing. Emotion is not nothing. Every thought has a subtle energy, whether of anger, desire, guilt, or love. When we think intensely of someone who has died, especially with strong feelings, we send out a kind of signal. If that person, in their current state, is also thinking of us, or still deeply attached to us, their mind may resonate with that signal, like two radios tuned to the same station. A connection can form. That is why so many people around the world share similar experiences. They dream of a deceased relative who looks unusually clear and vivid. The relative may speak, or simply stand and look. Sometimes they appear healthy and peaceful. Sometimes they appear thin, dark, and distressed. These dreams feel different from ordinary dreams. When we wake up, there is a heavy or light feeling that lingers, as if something real happened. Of course, not every dream is a literal visit. The mind is capable of replaying memories, weaving images from grief and longing. But from the perspective of spiritual traditions, there are indeed cases where the deceased use dreams as a channel, because that is when our usual defenses are lowered and the mind is more receptive. There are countless stories from monasteries and temples where practitioners, during rituals or deep recitation, suddenly feel or see the presence of unseen beings. The original article described a meditation hall where people were reciting the name of Amitabha Buddha, one voice after another, like a soft river of sound, to the ordinary eye. It was just a group of people with prayer beads, heads bowed. But the teacher in the hall once said something striking. He said, in effect, that the number of beings present there that could not be seen by human eyes was far greater than the number of visible practitioners. One day, during such a recitation session, a lay practitioner suddenly stiffened. His body was still sitting there, but his expression, voice, and energy shifted. It became clear that another consciousness had temporarily taken hold. Instead of being frightening or aggressive, this presence spoke with urgency and pain. I am not a bad person. The voice said, I am simply weighed down by heavy karma. I suffer greatly where I am. I heard that there are Buddhas here, that there is Dharma here that can be heard. I want to take refuge. I want to listen to the teachings. The teacher did not panic or treat this as entertainment. He did not encourage fear or superstition. Instead, he remained calm and compassionate. If you truly wish to take refuge, he told the being, then follow along sincerely with this recitation. Listen deeply to the teachings. Turn your mind toward the light. Whether we interpret this literally as possession or symbolically as a subconscious expression, the lesson is powerful. The dead, wherever they are, still have consciousness, still feel pain and hope, still respond to compassion and wisdom. The borders between worlds are not as rigid as our rational mind assumes, but contact between realms is governed by the law of affinity. It depends on resonance. Now, what about the question of offerings, especially burning offerings? In many cultures, when someone dies, their family burns paper money, paper houses, paper cars, even paper replicas of modern items like phones or computers. The idea is that, in the unseen world, these items will somehow be received and used by the deceased. On one level, this practice comes from a caring impulse. We do not want our loved one to be poor, hungry, or lonely in another realm. We use the language of our current lifestyle to express that care. But from the perspective of karma and subtle energy, how much of this actually reaches them? Does the deceased really get a fancy car or a new phone in some invisible dimension just because we burned a piece of paper shaped like those things? If we step back and look at this calmly, we can see that the material object itself, once burned, becomes ash and smoke. What could possibly pass through is not the physical item, but the intention behind it. The mind that is giving is what matters. The love, the gratitude, the wish for the deceased to be free from suffering and to find a good path forward. That is the real offering. However, intention alone is not always enough to transform the actual karmic situation of a being suffering in a lower realm. This is where the original article and many teachings emphasize the importance of merit. Merit is the subtle positive force generated when we do genuinely good actions, when we practice with sincerity, when we restrain our harmful impulses, and when we open our hearts to the suffering of others. Imagine merit like clean water. If your deceased relative is thirsty in a desert of confusion, your grief alone is like standing at the edge of the desert and crying. Your love is real and precious, but it does not automatically become water. On the other hand, if you take your love and channel it into concrete good deeds, such as helping the poor, supporting spiritual communities, releasing animals, volunteering in hospice, practicing meditation, reciting sutras with a clear mind, then each of those actions creates actual water. When you then consciously dedicate that merit, that water, saying in your heart, may they be free from suffering, may they find a higher rebirth, may they awaken, then that spiritual water can truly reach them. That is why, in many traditions, when someone dies, families are encouraged not only to hold rituals but also to do good in their name. They may sponsor a retreat, support the printing of spiritual books, help build a temple, fund educational projects, or simply commit to a period of daily chanting and meditation dedicated to their loved one. These are not empty gestures. They direct real positive energy into the karmic account of the deceased. In contrast, if a family spends huge amounts of money on expensive paper items, lavish feasts, and noisy rituals that are more about status and faith than genuine compassion, the benefit to the deceased is limited. The intention is mixed with show, with competition, with calculation. It is like pouring dirty water into a cup. It still counts as a kind of giving, but it is not very nourishing. The original article gently but clearly points out that what spirits most deeply need is not more of the same material illusions that trap them in craving in the first place. They need clarity. They need release from attachment. They need our help to turn their minds toward brighter states. Burning an enormous paper mansion for a relative who, in life, was already drowning in greed is not necessarily the most skillful way to help them. But reciting a sutra with genuine concentration, reflecting on cause and effect, and then sincerely dedicating that merit to them, that can actually loosen the chains that bind them. This is where the themes of awakening and destiny weave back into the story. We often think of destiny as something fixed and external. We imagine a book somewhere, with every key moment of our life and death already written. But from the perspective of karma, destiny is a dynamic pattern. At every moment, new seeds are being planted by what we think, say, and do. The deceased are not beyond this. They are still subject to cause and effect. If you have a strong karmic bond with someone, your actions now can influence their path, just as your pain and unresolved issues can tug them down. Your courage, kindness, and practice can pull them upward. Many people do not realize that clinging too tightly to a deceased loved one, constantly crying out in attachment and refusing to let go, can actually make it harder for them to move on to a better rebirth. It is like holding onto their sleeve while they are trying to climb a ladder. This does not mean we should suppress grief or pretend to be cold. It means that beyond the natural waves of sadness, we can choose to express our love in a wiser way. Cry if you must, but also sit quietly. Bring their face to mind, and then let your heart say, I love you, I thank you, and I want you to go where is best for you. I will take the suffering we shared and turn it into compassion for others. I will live more awake in your honor. When we do that, our love becomes spacious and healing. The question of whether the dead visit us also has a tender side. Sometimes, in the months after a loss, a person will suddenly smell a familiar scent when no one is around, like the perfume their mother used or the tobacco their father smoked. Sometimes a favorite song of the deceased will start playing in the most unlikely moment. Sometimes, just as we are about to give up on something important, we feel a calm and warm presence behind us, as if someone were silently placing a hand on our shoulder. Skeptics will say, this is just the mind trying to comfort itself. Believers will say, these are clear signs that the dead are visiting. A balanced view might say this: the mind and the unseen world are not separate. When the bond between hearts is deep, the mind of the deceased and the mind of the living can touch. That touch can manifest in subtle ways, through signs, dreams, and synchronicities. But even here, wisdom is needed. Not every contact is helpful. Sometimes a deceased being is so attached that they hover around the living in a way that drains energy, worsens nightmares, or deepens depression. In such cases, the most compassionate thing may not be to cling or repeatedly invite their presence, but to do practices that help both sides release. This can include recitation of the name of Amitabha Buddha or other sacred names, visualization of light guiding them onward, or inviting qualified spiritual guides to perform rituals that encourage them to move toward brighter realms. There is another layer to all of this, one that gently redirects the spotlight back onto us, the living. When we ask where the dead have gone, we are also secretly asking where we ourselves will go. We see our parents, friends leaving one by one, and somewhere inside we know that one day we will be lying on that bed, surrounded by the whispers of relatives, the beeping of machines, or perhaps no one at all. If we wait until that moment to think about karma, compassion, and wisdom, it may be too late to build deep habits. The mind at death is often frightened, confused, or clinging. Its quality in that moment is heavily influenced by the habits it built over decades. If we spend our lives constantly angry, greedy, distracted, and numb, it is unrealistic to expect that our last thought will be peaceful and luminous. That is why traditions encourage us to begin practicing now. Even in small ways. When you hold back harsh words, you plant a seed. When you treat a stranger with respect, you plant a seed. When you sit for even 10 minutes a day, watching your breath and gently returning from wandering thoughts, You plant a seed. When you recite a sutra or sacred phrase with sincerity, you plant a seed. Over time, these seeds mature into a certain kind of character. You become less easily shaken, more easily moved by others' pain, more willing to take responsibility for your own action. This character is not something you can fake or buy. It becomes your inner adornment. When death comes, that adornment is what you take with you. Paper houses cannot follow. Bank accounts cannot follow. Titles and followers cannot follow. But every moment of kindness, every step of practice, every insight into the impermanent and interconnected nature of all things, those follow. Now, imagine a whole family living this way. Imagine that when someone dies, the family gathers not only to cry and burn paper, but also to sit together, meditate, and commit to doing good in that person's name. Imagine siblings deciding not to fight over inheritance, but to talk openly about their grief and their shared intention to honor their parent by becoming better human beings. Imagine children learning that death is not an unspeakable horror, but a solemn transition that everyone will face, and that there are ways to help each other cross it with dignity and clarity. In such a family, even if there is pain, there is also wisdom. The dead are not treated as ghosts to be feared or as gods to be bribed, but as fellow travelers in the great journey of consciousness. And the living turn their fear of death into motivation to live with more presence and more love. Let me share a story that captures this transformation. There was a man who grew up with a very strict father. The father was successful in worldly terms but emotionally distant. He rarely praised his children, often scolded them, and demanded excellence in school, work, and manners. The son spent years feeling both resentful and hungry for approval. Their relationship was a pattern of conflict and silence. When the father fell ill and eventually died, the son was shocked by how much grief surged up. Grief mixed with unresolved anger and regret. At the funeral, he cried loudly, partly from sadness, partly from guilt. In the following months, he burned offerings regularly, buying the most elaborate paper items, telling himself that he wanted his father to enjoy comfort and luxury in the other world, perhaps as compensation for the emotional poverty of their relationship. Yet, his nightmares did not stop. Again and again, he dreamed of his father, not smiling in a fancy house, but lying alone in a dim room, looking away, or scolding him in the old familiar way. The son woke up exhausted and heavy. One day, out of desperation, he went to see an experienced spiritual teacher. After listening quietly, the teacher said something simple. Your father does not need more paper cars. What he needs is release. Your heart is still tangled with anger and craving for approval. He feels that. Instead of burning more paper, why not start by forgiving him and also asking his forgiveness? Why not do good in his name to transform the heavy karma of resentment between you? The teacher encouraged him to set aside time every day for a month to sit quietly, bring his father's face to mind, and speak from the heart. Some days he expressed anger and hurt, saying things he never dared to say in life. Some days he cried and remembered small acts of care that he had overlooked before. After each session, he recited a sacred name and dedicated whatever peace arose to his father. At the same time, he began volunteering once a week at a center for elderly people with few visitors. He told himself that for every smile he brought to an elder there, he was making up for a smile he had not been able to share with his father. He did this not as punishment, but as a path of transformation. Gradually, his dreams changed. The father in his dreams became calmer, sometimes just sitting silently, sometimes giving a brief nod. The son felt lighter during the day. Their relationship, though the father's body was gone, was being healed on a different level. In this story, we can see that the real currency of connection between worlds is not paper. It is the subtle energy of awakened love, the willingness to grow, the courage to face cause and effect honestly, and the practice of dedicating our positive changes to those who have gone before us. As we approach the end of this long reflection, I want to gather the threads and speak directly to your heart. If you are listening to this because you have lost someone precious, I want you to know that your grief is valid. You do not need to suppress it or be ashamed of it. Missing someone is a sign that you have loved. Tears are not weakness. They are the water that softens the hard shell around the heart. At the same time, remember that their journey is still unfolding. You cannot walk it for them, but you can send them light. You can turn your sorrow into a commitment to live with more awareness, kindness, and courage. Every time you refrain from doing something harmful because you remember them, every time you choose a wiser response because you want them to be proud, you are already offering them something far more precious than paper riches. If you regularly burn offerings, you do not have to instantly stop all your tradition. Rituals can be beautiful containers for our emotion, but perhaps next time, as you stand by the fire, you can add a new layer. As you place the paper into the flames, you can also silently offer your intention to practice, your vow to become a more awakened person. You can say in your heart, I am not just giving you things. I am giving you the merit of my efforts to be less selfish, less angry, and more compassionate. If you have had dreams or strange experiences with the deceased, you can treat them with neither blind belief nor cold dismissal. You can simply take them as invitations to look more deeply. Ask yourself, what is my heart trying to tell me? What unfinished feelings need attention? How can I respond in a way that benefits both of us? Across the visible and invisible line. And if you are young and think that death is still far away, I would gently remind you that life is unpredictable. We do not know who will go first, but this is not meant to scare you. It is meant to wake you up to the preciousness of each day. Every conversation could be the last. Every hug could be the last. Every act of kindness, every moment of practice, every step toward wisdom is therefore infinitely valuable. In the end, the question, do they really come back to see us, carries another question inside it. Are we really living in a way that honors the fact that we will one day become ancestors? Memories, dreams, and perhaps subtle presences in the lives of those we leave behind. You cannot decide all the circumstances of your death, but you can decide the general shape of the consciousness that will meet it. You can decide whether your mind will be mostly dominated by fear and regret, or whether it will have, at least to some degree, the familiarity of someone who has practiced letting go. So, my friend, as you finish this talk, I invite you to take a moment. Close your eyes if you like. Bring to mind someone who has passed away, someone you still think of. Feel whatever arises, without judgment. Then, in your own words, offer them the blessing. Offer them your wish that they be free from suffering and find a good path. Then, quietly, make one small decision about how you will live differently starting today because of what you learned from them, both in their life and in their death. If this sharing resonated with you, if it brought comfort, insight, or even just a sense that you are not alone in asking these questions, I warmly invite you to let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a dream or a moment when you felt a deceased loved one near you? Have you ever transformed your grief into a new way of living? Your story might be the thread that helps someone else's heart hold together tonight. If you would like to support this kind of long, reflective content, you can subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with friends who might be struggling with loss or curiosity about the unseen side of life. If you feel drawn to go even deeper and support the channel more steadily, you can also consider joining as a member. Most of all, thank you for staying with me, and between the world of the living and the world of the dead there is a bridge made of awareness, compassion, and practice. Every time you choose kindness over indifference, wisdom over confusion, and courage over avoidance, you are strengthening that bridge for yourself and for those you love, on both sides of the veil.
Every person carries a certain energy. Your focus, your dreams, your purpose. bracelet is a physical reminder of that energy. Symbol you wear daily that pushes you to stay grounded, balanced, and aligned. If one of the bracelets caught your eye, you can order it through the link in the description and check more powerful styles on our homepage store. Choose the one that strengthens your journey.